Hey guys, welcome back. It's Missy, and today I am going through a midlife crisis, and I was really missing the 90s, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna bring the 90s back, hence the 90s hairstyle. So I hope you enjoy a little bit of the nostalgia. I hope you enjoyed this 90s hairstyle, and if you don't, it's okay. It's my midlife crisis. You're just along for the ride. So today, on today's video, we're gonna be talking about why setting boundaries doesn't work with the narcissist. So let's talk about boundaries. In general, boundaries are for when two people respect each other, have compassion, and care how things affect one another. So that's when you express how you feel. Hey, I don't really like when you do this. Can you please stop? Can you do this instead? And they're like, hey, yeah, sure, no problem. That's how usually boundaries work with healthy, respectful people. Narcissists don't have that ability. They don't see past themselves, and they only care about getting what they want. Usually, what they want is to manipulate and control other people. They want power. Their ego is deeply bruised and wounded, and they have deep shame, and they live off of that bruised ego and that deep shame. And how they live off of it is constantly getting supply from other people, from their negative reactions, from their positive reactions, from manipulating them. They don't have the ability to have empathy or compassion for other people and understand that other people have wants and needs outside of themselves. They're too egotistical. Narcissists are too egotistical. So with that being said, what happens when you set boundaries with a narcissist? When you set a boundary with a narcissist, you're like, hey, you know, this is bothering me. Can you please stop? They will use it against you. They will use it as a way to further manipulate you. So maybe they'll be like, oh yeah, you know, I'll stop doing this thing. They'll go and try to hurt you in sneakier ways. Or they'll continue to do this thing, but in a more manipulative way. They will gaslight you, make you feel crazy for trying to set boundaries or for feeling that way. How dare you? You know, what's wrong with you that you're trying to stop me from doing this thing? I'm your mom. You can't say no to your mom. Or, hey, I'm your partner. Like, you're supposed to love me. We're supposed to be one. And they will make you feel crazy for trying to set boundaries, or they will mock you, make fun of you, or they will guilt you and make you feel like you're doing something wrong or it's really bad what you're doing. See, the thing with boundaries is boundaries mean you care about yourself. You're taking care of yourself. You're loving yourself. And if you care about yourself, you have a strong sense of self, you love yourself, it makes it harder for the narcissist to try to manipulate and control you. So they try to knock those boundaries down. No, you're not allowed to have boundaries. And they make boundaries seem like a negative thing. How dare you set this rule against me? I am entitled to you, and how dare you? That's what they think. Not really, subconsciously. So you've probably, you know, when you first learn about boundaries, you probably have set boundaries. Maybe someone's like, oh, set a boundary with a narcissist. I'm sure probably in my videos I've talked about, hey, set a boundary with a narcissist. So then you go and do what you're used to doing, what you feel like you should do to set a boundary, which is communicate how you're feeling, and then it goes nowhere. Or you deal with the things like we had talked about. You get mocked, you know, they continue to do it, they don't care. So you deal with all of that, and you're like, boundaries don't work. How am I supposed to deal with a narcissist if these boundaries don't work? Which we're going to go into in a minute about what to do and how to set a boundary with a narcissist that will actually work. But before we go into that, we need to talk about something that gets in the way of you protecting yourself, of you setting a boundary, and that usually comes down to you struggle with accepting the reality of what's going on, or accepting that the narcissist is the way they are. So a problem that often we run into is like cognitive dissonance, which I talked about a few weeks ago, which I would definitely recommend. I'll put it right here. I definitely recommend looking at that, because cognitive dissonance can definitely get in the way where you have two conflicting ideas and beliefs about the narcissist, which makes it very difficult for you to leave, for you to set boundaries, for you to see the reality of things. So that's one thing will be hard for you to accept, that the narcissist is the way they are. And oftentimes you won't believe what they are showing you, their behaviors, the mistreatment that they're showing you that they are. You'll get stuck on their words and what they're saying, the future faking, the fantasy, you know, the love bombing. You'll get stuck on all of those because of obviously the trauma bond, but also because you don't want to believe this person is really that bad. Like, you want those good times. They've shown you the type of person they could be, so you will hold on to that. You'll hold on to their words rather than believing their actions. And so that will make you feel like it's possible to fix them because they give you these glimpses of hope. It will be hard for you to say no to them or for you to believe yourself. Another thing that you struggle with when it comes to boundaries is you don't believe in yourself and you believe more of them. You know, they're constantly berating you, they're constantly telling you you can't trust yourself, they are controlling you, they're beating you down, they're telling you all these horrible things, like you're always going to be alone, you're never going to find any better, no one's going to take care of you, you're damaged goods. You know, you hear all these things, you start to believe them because they keep beating it into you, and so then you do fear very much being alone. You fear that it will be much worse without them. You fear you won't be able to take care of yourself without them. Or maybe you'll fear hurting them, or fear ruining the relationship, fearing that you'll never be able to go back to them, and you fear potentially regretting your decision, or you fear making the wrong decision. So all those things can stop you from standing up for yourself or from enforcing a consequence on the narcissist. So all in all, you really struggle with accepting the reality of the situation. And so we have to break that. In order to move forward and to take care of yourself, it's important that you break the cognitive dissonance. It's important you break kind of that delusion they've created of them being this certain person and feeling like you can help them or you should help them. So I want to ask you something. If you had someone that their arm got bitten off by a shark, would you try to help them grow their arm back? Probably not, because it's impossible. No, you would probably instead accept that life is forever different and they'll have to live differently. That's the same way you want to look at a narcissist. Their brain has actually developed differently than your brain because trauma affects the brain and they've been through something traumatic, whether they went through abuse or not, maybe not trauma, maybe they went through some sort of neglect where they were never told no. That completely alters the way the brain is. And in your prefrontal cortex, studies have shown that narcissists have a more thin layer in their prefrontal cortex that has to do with empathy and self-reflection. So they actually have a brain defect, if that's what we want to call it. So you can't change this brain defect. You can't change this person. So you have to accept and let go of trying to change this person. They're not going to change. They are their shame, and they are just a bruised ego. They're a shell of a person, and that's what you have to let go of. Now, since boundaries don't work, what should you do? If you can leave them, that would be the best course of action, is to not talk to them, to stay away from them as much as possible, to move out if you live with them. That would be the best. But it's not realistic for everyone. No one has the funds or the means, or maybe you have to parent with them, whatever it is. You can't always just not have the narcissist in your life for some of us. So if you don't have the ability to go no contact or to have this narcissist not be in your life, then this would be the next course of action. First, set a boundary with yourself. The narcissist is not going to change their behavior, no matter how many times you ask them to, no matter how many times you share your feelings with them. It falls on deaf ears. They're never going to listen. So stop trying to change their behavior or expect them to change in any sort of way. You need to change your behavior and how you treat them. Your relationship with them is always going to be abnormal and it's going to be shallow, and you can't save them, like we talked about. Now, if you don't believe me and you feel like maybe there's a possibility that you can set a boundary and they'll listen, let's look at past history. When was the last time you told them how you felt and they did something about it, or they changed in some sort of way? Probably never. Or if they did change, it was for a very small portion of the time and it didn't last long. Or they stopped doing that behavior and moved on to doing something else different, more manipulative, whatever it is. So accept that that's not going to change, and instead turn it towards yourself and set a boundary with yourself. Like, if they call me names, I'm not going to speak to them. If they touch me, I will avoid them. I will leave the environment. I will call the police if I have to. I will stay away from them as much as possible. That's the boundary you set with yourself, and you want to hold yourself accountable with that boundary. You don't have to verbalize it to them. You just say it to yourself. This is my boundary that I'm going to do in this scenario. The next thing you can do is go through the imaginary scenarios and know how the narcissist will respond. And then come up with a rebuttal so you won't get sucked into reacting off of them or into their love bombing. And so you won't get sucked into their delusion. In this imaginary scenario, you want to always remember, respond, don't react. Observe, don't absorb. So think about how you would handle this situation. And you've been around the narcissist for long enough, you can kind of have an idea of how you'd imagine they would respond, and you can imagine how you would handle it in that situation. So that way you feel like, I've already been through this. I already imagined them calling me the worst names, or I imagined them saying something very triggering, and I know how to deal with it because I imagined it. So you're preparing for that scenario. Now, when it comes to actually being in that scenario where they are disrespecting your boundaries, they don't know it's your boundary, you know it's your boundary, that's when you need to enforce a consequence. So you're not telling them how you feel, you're telling them this is what's going to happen if you continue to do it. You're not trying to show any type of reaction. You're just like, if you continue to speak to me, I will leave right now. You do it in a calm, cool, collected way, no reaction, just enforcing a consequence. As we had talked about, normally when you set a boundary, you usually say, hey, I don't like when you do this, can you stop? The narcissist will continue to do it. So that's why you want to completely stay away from sharing your feelings. Instead, what you want to do is just enforce that consequence. This works not because they care or they have empathy, but because they don't want to deal with the punishment or the shame or the embarrassment. And then they know you are not someone to be messed with. They know that, oh, if I do this, then they're gonna do this. They try to mess with people that have no idea about their tactics. You know their tactics. And so you're not putting up with those tactics. You're enforcing a consequence. You're making them face the bad decisions they make and the consequences to those bad decisions. They don't like that, so they're gonna not mess with you anymore. And that's how you truly set a boundary with a narcissist. It's a little bit different with healthy people, but you can still have a boundary with a narcissist, but it's gonna be a secret that they don't know. If you know your boundary, they're not gonna know it's a boundary. They just know if they do this, then there's gonna be this consequence, and they wanna avoid that. They wanna avoid the shame and embarrassment and the punishment. All in all, worst case scenario, let's say it doesn't work, just always leave the situation as much as possible. They do something against your boundary, you leave that situation every time. You don't have to say a word, you don't have to show any reaction. That's the most important thing. Don't show any emotional reaction, otherwise they got you. Same way dogs can smell fear. You don't want to have an emotional reaction. You just want to act. They need an action. They act like children, and what happens with children is children respond to actions, not words. And so you need to do the same thing. There needs to be a consequence for their actions. And now they know you're not someone to be messed with. So what do you guys think? Leave it all in the comments below. And please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and do a 90s hairstyle this weekend. And share with someone that you think may need this video. Until next time, thanks for watching. Bye guys.
Let's not have cereal on our mouth. Let's not be embarrassed for 20 minutes straight with cereal on our mouth. Won't you come to me? Show me who you are. Baby, 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 won't you come to me? That's really embarrassing. What's that? What is that? Get in here. I don't like computers. I'd rather, you can't touch them. I'd rather furniture. I can touch furniture. I can't go in the computer and move it manually. Stop it. Oh my god, I'm stuck. Ugh,